So, Jonathan Lemire, to you goes the task of the view from the other side. Now, I did also process the news of the White House seeming to, I don't know, take a victory lap around killing coronavirus relief talks and plunging the markets. I mean, I wondered if it was the steroids talking. I wondered if there was anyone talking at all. Your AP, you have a great piece out about the West Wing as a ghost town. Talk about what's going on there.
It's a West Wing right now that is largely empty, and those that are there, according to our reporting, are afraid and confused and uncertain as to what's next. First of all, of course, the coronavirus itself is living in the building. The president, of course, has it. So does the first lady. There have been a number of staffers who have tested positive. The number seems to grow by the day. A couple more in the press shop. Deputy press secretaries today tested positive. And there's certainly a lack of real direction as to what's next. We, of course, know the president is calling the shots. There were some aides who hoped, with some reason, that thought that the president's battle with the virus himself, 3 days or so in the hospital, he might come out with even just a little more understanding of the virus and perhaps be able to show a little more empathy towards those who have suffered. No one was expecting a personality reboot here. Their expectations were modest, but even those were dashed. What we've heard from the president the last 12 hours or so, that he has said that the virus must be dominated. He has suggested that the nation is around the corner again from the pandemic, a pandemic that is still on some days claiming 1,000 American lives a day. While hospitalized, he mentioned not one word of compassion for those that have suffered. And now he comes back, plunging into the White House yesterday, mind you, without a mask, and now has blown up these talks, which, as noted, may not have gone anywhere anyway. But now he seems to, by doing what he did today, own their failure. We've seen the market plummet in its immediate aftermath. We have seen, it may be disarming him of his best possible weapon, his best argument for re-election, which would be a strong economy. There are so many Americans who are still suffering economically because of what's happened. And there's now great uncertainty as to how he's going to govern, but also how can he campaign? We're a month out, and he's down somewhat significantly in a lot of places. And it's uncertain whether he will be able to pronounced fit to resume traveling. He and his team, they're eyeing that debate next Thursday. He made it clear he wants to be there with Joe Biden, but a lot of questions remain whether that's going to be possible.
Jonathan Lemire, I talked to a Trump advisor sort of post-debate performance, but pre-COVID diagnosis, and he said to me, Donald Trump needed these debate performances to go his way, and that meant keeping his mouth shut and sort of hoping for some sort of moment from Joe Biden. He wasn't capable of keeping his mouth shut. He hasn't been capable of keeping his mouth shut since that debate, and he still hasn't cleaned up the problems that his own aides viewed as problematic. The footsie with white supremacists and, just his own conduct and behavior that seemed to repel people if you trust those polls. What effort exists to even get him ready for another debate if that should come to pass? Chris Christie is at the moment hospitalized, and his campaign manager is COVID positive. His two most senior communications advisors, Hope Hicks and Kayleigh McEnany, also infected with the coronavirus.
So much has happened, Nicolle, since that debate. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that it was just a week ago. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that the Trump campaign had put a lot of eggs in that basket. They really thought that first debate was going to be the moment. With so few set pieces left, so little time remaining in the campaign, they thought that debate could be the moment where they start to turn things around, that Biden perhaps would stumble on the stage and the president would sort of overpower him. And instead, we know that did not happen. Donald Trump's solution to every problem has always been more Donald Trump. And that, in this case, many advisors believe was a mistake. That was a night where he, instead of constantly interrupting and berating the vice president, he needed to sit back. They wanted him to let the former vice president get himself into trouble, perhaps overextend himself and create some sort of moment that could be damaging going forward. That didn't happen at all. In fact, the president's support plummeted after that debate. In a race that has been remarkably stable despite the tumult of 2020, the debate was a moment that did move the needle, and in a bad way for Donald Trump. And then to immediately have that followed with this coronavirus pandemic, which for so many Americans is a sense of the president instead of receiving their sympathy for being sick, it's almost a sense of like, well, he brought this upon himself. It was his recklessness that, ignoring the safety guidelines of his own government that put him in this position, and therefore maybe emblematic of how he has led the nation through this pandemic, a nation that is still suffering so much. As far as the mechanics of the debate prep, that's unclear because, as you said, most of his debate team is currently sidelined with the coronavirus, and he barely prepared last time anyway. But right now, we know that's the date they've circled on the calendar. He wants to go to the debate, and he wants to resume campaigning, even though right now, of course, he's not just coronavirus positive, he's still contagious.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.